that I made myself believe that seem to divide us. Once in my life, moving on towards a sinking feeling that you were right, saying I'm not seeing all the lies that I made myself believe that seem to divide us. Once in my life, moving on towards a
Can you hear me now? I cannot wait to check my text messages. Oh, there's Camellia messaging me. Mic's not on, mic's not on, mic's not on, mic's not on. All right, tell you what, show's over. Forget it. Let's go home. Let's go home. I quit. If you're watching the Wake Up America show today and you love seeing me screw up, well, congratulations. You are in the right place. Have some self-respect, Austin. Stop wearing those brightly colored shirts. Can you please quit it with that bisexual lighting of yours?
How dare you?
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. That's how you know that this is just one guy like a DJ spinning some tracks, doing my best. Stacks of wax. No, it's live streaming and there's no producer here. It's just me. Oops. It's my fault. Anyways, let's get the show on the road, shall we? Donald Trump sends off a list of vice presidential picks, and let's just say, well, Vivek Ramaswamy is not on it.
No, God, please.
Yes, I know, and I'm sad to see that the list does not include the candidates that I was very excited about. So we are going to talk about that this morning. Of course, we will be going through the list and, just poo-pooing all over it, essentially. And then we will, at 7:30 this morning, we're going to speak to the Secretary of State of Missouri running for governor, Secretary Jay Ashcroft, son of the legendary John Ashcroft. Some of you may know or be familiar with. Jay is going to join us in studio today on set. In about 25 minutes from now, we'll hear about his campaign for governor, the issues that he's running on. And if you're a Missourian, sometimes we get a lot of people who text in and say, Austin, I really like it when you do a little bit of Missouri politics as well, because we got a lot of people from the Midwest who listen in. But I will try and make it as available to the national audience as possible by asking him things like how he feels about the Trump trial, et cetera, et cetera. If you have a question for Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, you can send me a text and I'll read it to him. 573-319-1586. Again, that text line is open at 573-319-1586. Thank you to our friend, Eric John Pizza Artist. He's been joining us live for the last week or so for the donation and reminding us that today is 80 years since D-Day. Honor our vets always, many of them who were in need.
From now
Absolutely.
on,
thank you to our veterans.
It's going to be America first, okay? America first.
Absolutely. And we appreciate those who landed on that beach so that we could enjoy our beach days here. Our freedom depended on those Canadians, Americans, and British forces that landed up on that beach. So we appreciate them very much for that sacrifice. Many of them who made the ultimate sacrifice today. And let's remember them today. Thank you, Eric John Pizza artist. We appreciate that very much. So yes, let the eagles soar. We'll hear from Jay Ashcroft this morning at 7:30. Before we do that, though, we are going to react to my buddy Will Scharf. He's running for attorney general here in the state of Missouri, but he's also one of Donald Trump's lawyers. And he just gave the most brutal, epic smackdown of that Clinton lapdog, George Stephanopoulos, to his face on ABC News the other day. He pulled a Kristi Noem, but busted a cap in that Clinton lapdog. It was beautiful. Beautiful. Thug life. Will Scharf doesn't care. Will Scharf doesn't give a hoot. We're going to talk about that. We'll play the clip. We will react. It's lots of fun. You don't want to miss it. That's going to be before Jay Ashcroft. After Jay Ashcroft, we've got Camelia Peterson at 8 a.m. Central Time, who she is apparently, look at this. Okay, here we go. The sounds are great. You've been silent throughout, says Sharian. Fred Siegel says, Mike. Someone, Quest says, Mike. Another listener says, muted. Thank you for all those text messages to 573-319-1586. Camelia Peterson will join us this morning at 8 a.m. Central Time to talk about how hot flight attendants provide better customer experience. Of course. Let's talk about the important issues here on the Wake Up America show. Apparently, Camelia, a lot of people don't enjoy, well, I say a lot, at least one person does not enjoy Camelia Peterson's show appearance on the Wake Up America show because they tweeted Justin Haas, who is from the region that Camelia is from, so Southwest Missouri. He says that he doesn't hate her, but he can't watch her. It's like a trad wife and a feminist, and also debating life with a mom/feminist. Anyone than her, do booking, find points of view. I'm pretty sure I do booking for this show, but anyone but her. Well, I'm sorry. Bad news, Justin Haas. You're just going to have to hear from Camelia at 8 a.m. to talk about the hot flight attendants. Too bad. I do booking for this show. And people don't appreciate what it takes to put a show together. You got to have your regular guests and your new bookings. People like Courtney Conover the other day. Oh, I see her in the chat. What's up, Courtney? We got lots of new people on the show, along with the regular guests. And of course, another regular guest who we haven't seen that regularly lately, but who is back today, Daniela Pensack for Thirsty Thursdays. That's delicious. To talk about why young people aren't liberal. That's another reason to hit the applause button, isn't it? Austin, you hit the applause button too much. It's too much. It's fake. Have some self-respect, Austin. We do have to give a shout out and a thank you to Papa Peterson today for providing my wardrobe. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it lovely? We appreciate that very much. I'm feeling very patriotic today. How about you, Mr. President?
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. Excuse me.
Now, I love it when you get in unsolicited advice from people who aren't in your industry and who don't care about what happens to you. They wish you ill will. They want bad things to happen to you. So when they give you advice about how to succeed, you should definitely listen to the advice of the people who don't wish you well. You know what I'm saying? They don't like how this Wake Up America show is being branded. They don't like the bisexual lighting. They don't like the sound effects like this.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm going to come.
I'm not doing the job right. The Wake Up America show is just not pulling things off. We're just a total failure. Click that like button if you like this total failure of a show, would you? Why don't you do that right now? We've got so much to get through and so little time. Let's go ahead and hit the news this morning. Before we, real quick, before we talk about Donald Trump's VP picks and play the Will Scharf clip, did you see what 50 Cent was saying about Donald Trump the other day? Speaking of thug life.
Have you made a decision?
I haven't.
What do you think is the
Thank you.
what do you see as the significance of African American men in this election? For both of you.
What do they think about African American men in this election? She's talking about like where does 50 Cent think African-American men are going to go this election. He says.
Identifying with Trump.
Why do you say that?
Unless they got RICO charges. And
They got RICO charges. Black men identifying with Donald Trump because they got RICO charges. That's very funny. Donald Trump campaign has sent out some paperwork, some vetting paperwork to possible 2024 VPs, and several notable names are on the short list. Here they are: Senator Marco Rubio, Florida; J.D. Vance of Ohio; Rep. Tim Scott of South Carolina, I guess; Representative Byron Donalds of Florida. Okay, pretty good there. Like him. Elise Stefanik of New York; North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum; and former Trump administration Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson have all received paperwork in the last month. So, I don't know. Do we have something on here that just represents meh? I don't know. Do we have a meh button on this thing? No. How about more like a...
Oh, my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the f***, man? Get your ass on, boy. Get your goddamn ugly ass on.
Not excited. But out of that list, who would you pick? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who would you pick out of the list of the people that I just read off? You know what? I would pick out of all of that? I'd either pick Byron Donalds of Florida or Ben Carson, to be honest, out of all of those. Those were my picks. I think that Ben Carson is a good man. He is a genius neurosurgeon. He wouldn't cause a lot of problems. He wouldn't stab Donald Trump in the back. And look, Erd's mommy says she loves Ben Carson. He operated on my son years ago, saved his life. Wow, that's fantastic. Well, even more reason to choose Ben Carson. That's who I would pick. What about you? 15 minutes until we speak to Missouri Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. So we better get to this Will Scharf, who is a candidate for Attorney General of Missouri, interview with George Stephanopoulos. Watch this beautiful, brilliant takedown of George Stephanopoulos, who is trying to run interference for Joe Biden in this presidential campaign. This is a thing of beauty and majesty. We love it.
Attorneys Will Scharf. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. There's a lot I want to get to. One of the things I want to begin with, though, is what Aaron Katursky was just talking about, this pre-sentencing investigation. Is the president going to fully cooperate?
The president's going to cooperate with the pre-sentence investigation, and we're going to speedily appeal this unjust verdict. I think this case is replete with reversible error. We plan to vigorously defend President Trump's rights in the appellate courts all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary.
On Thursday, you praised the jury. You said that they were considering the law and the evidence seriously, and you predicted a just verdict. Do you accept their decision now?
No, I think when you look at the jury instructions here, Judge Merchan essentially, I wouldn't say rigged the deliberations, but certainly steered the jury towards the verdict that he clearly wanted. We're going to be challenging Judge Merchan's failure to recuse on appeal. I think it constitutes a clear due process violation. We're obviously going to be challenging aspects of the jury instructions themselves as well. I think there's a lot of appellate material there.
That's quite a change for you. Before the verdict came out.
Here's where the claws come out. This is, he gave him 1 minute of straightforward questions. That's quite a challenge. That's quite a change for you. Now the claws come out. Watch Will perfectly rebut George's arguments.
You said that the jury instructions are quite favorable to your side. So when you think they're going your way, the instructions are favorable. When the jury rules against you, the judge made a mistake?
I think hope for the best, plan for the worst, George. But I think when you look at the totality of the circumstances in this case, this is a prosecution that should have never been brought. This was a case tried in front of a judge who clearly should have recused. I think we have a lot of fair complaints with the way that this trial was conducted. And I think ultimately President Trump will be vindicated on appeal.
The ethics panel for the state of New York said the judge was not required to recuse.
Well, I think when you look at binding Supreme Court precedent, including most notably the seminal case on judicial recusal, Caperton v. Massey, even the appearance of impropriety can require a judge to recuse for reasons of due process. Here, I think we have far more than an appearance of impropriety. The fact that Judge Merchan contributed to Joe Biden during the 2020 election, many of the other issues that we've raised in our recusal papers throughout this case. I think Judge Merchan should have clearly recused, and I think that's going to be an issue that the appellate courts are going to have to deal with.
If appearance of impropriety is the standard for recusal, then why shouldn't Justice Thomas and Justice Alito have to recuse from the cases before the Supreme Court?
Ah, beautiful. Now, George really thinks that he's got Will here with this turnabout. He feels like he's playing Uno, and Stephanopoulos just played a reversal card. Now, watch Will Scharf pull a draw 4.
I think the appearance of impropriety there is not nearly as severe. I think you're not talking about financial conflicts of interest. You're certainly not talking about a judge who's violated judicial code of conduct in terms of political contributions. I think that's.
So Stephanopoulos is trying to conflate the judge in Trump's case who donated to Joe Biden with the justice of the Supreme Court, Alito, who flew a flag that said an appeal to heaven outside his house. So Stephanopoulos thinks that he's got a beautiful reversal, and Scharf plays his draw 4.
Frankly, stunning. Speaking as a former attorney, former law clerk, I've never heard of a judge contributing to political candidates before. I've certainly never heard of a judge sitting in judgment over the opponent of the political candidate he contributed to. I think the American people see through this sort of thing. I think that's why President Trump's poll numbers seem to be rising rather than falling. The Trump campaign obviously smashed political fundraising records, including raising money from tens of thousands of new donors in the 24 hours after this verdict. I think the American people see this judgment for what it was, and we're certainly hopeful that on appeal we can get it thrown out just because of how wildly unjust it is.
This is the cream of the legal crop from the great state of Missouri, and you're welcome for it, America. You're welcome. As usual, Missouri leads the charge.
Again, the ethics panel had all the evidence that you had, and they decided.
Ooh, Stephanopoulos is feeling a little salty right now because he's getting slapped around.
There was not a conflict there, but let's move on. There's several legal experts have criticized the way the Trump legal team handled this trial. Was it a mistake for the president not to testify?
I think in light of the Judge Merchan's decision about the scope of allowable cross-examination, which I believe was wildly wrong, I think it would have been dangerous for President Trump to take the stand. But I think had President Trump taken the stand, certainly on direct, he would have been a compelling witness. I continue to believe, as I believe most Americans believe, that President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong here, certainly nothing illegal, and certainly not rising to the level of this conviction. So I think that was a decision that was made in light of the way that Judge Merchan was handling these proceedings.
Absolutely nothing wrong. Well, 12 jurors said he clearly falsified the business records and did it to advance a conspiracy.
I believe that verdict is not supported by anything even close to proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And again, we're going to be vigorously challenging this verdict on appeal. We think we have ample grounds to. I think some of Judge Merchan's evidentiary decisions really throughout the conduct of this trial were frankly astounding. Not allowing Brad Smith to testify the way that he wanted. This is one of the world's leading experts on federal election law. Severely.
Ron Helton over in the chat. Good morning, Ron, and welcome to the show, brother. It's nice to meet you. Says 12 jurors in a highly democratic city. Exactly. This isn't a jury of his peers, and the judge in the case was a donor to his opponent in this campaign. Will Scharf just keeps, Stephanopoulos keeps setting it up, and Will just keeps knocking it down. This is a master class in how to handle a hostile, high-level mainstream media interview. Very few people could put up with this and be able to give it back to George as he throws them across the plate.
Limiting the scope of examination of Robert Costello, who I believe had absolutely damning information about the prosecution's case. On decision after decision after decision, Judge Merchan, I think, departed from normal courtroom procedure, normal courtroom practice to essentially stack the deck against President Trump. And again, these are all issues that we're going to raise on appeal. We're going to raise them vigorously, and we believe that we're going to win.
Another criticism that has been labeled against the Trump legal team was that it was a mistake not to acknowledge the relationship with Stormy Daniels. They say that put the president's defense up against a wall.
I think the truth needed to come through. I think that President Trump has consistently denied this affair. Stormy Daniels previously denied this affair. I don't think lying about what happened would have helped anything here. But again, I just completely disagree with the premise of that question.
I love that's a really good one to have in your back pocket. If you're like me and you're in the media and you do hostile interviews like what Will's doing right now, I completely disagree with the premise of the question. Is probably a very good.
The president has called the judge a tyrant and a devil. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
As I've said repeatedly during this interview, George, I think Judge Merchan should have clearly recused. I think he was irretrievably biased, and I think that came through in decision.
And it's perfectly fine to repeat yourself when you feel like somebody is asking you the same question, but from a different angle in that way. Will, again, showing us how to react.
Throughout the conduct of this trial, whether it's evidentiary decisions. But again, I think the decision not to recuse in light of the severe appearance of impropriety, I believe actual conflict of interest between Judge Merchan and the defendant he was sitting in judgment over, it's head-scratching, to be honest, that he didn't step down off of this case.
Are you concerned that the continuing attacks on Judge Merchan and the attacks on witnesses like Michael Cohen is going to actually make sentencing worse for the former president?
I think it's really important to note that President Trump is running.
Now, here's the thing. Now, you may think that this is just like straight, kind of a straight reporting, right? This is ABC News. This is the mainstream of mainstream media, and that this isn't editorializing. This is just legitimate journalization questioning. But let me show you something that you might have missed. If you can see there at the bottom of the screen, they call these lower thirds or banners, or sometimes we call them chyrons in the industry. And here is where the producers are editorializing down here, right? So they're making sure that you know that this, whether this is a fact or not, they're deciding to show you the story that they want you to read. This is an example of how their bias is displayed, even in, for example, when you read a story that is just a complete rote recitation of the facts from the news, you may think to yourself, okay, well, that was a completely unbiased story. It just told you the facts. There's nothing unwayward. It doesn't take sides. There's no bias involved in this story at all. Well, that's actually not true. There's no such thing as an unbiased story in journalism, because the bias was in deciding which story to cover in the first place. Even if after the fact, you're still just giving the facts about it, your bias is implicit in what you're deciding to show. And of course, they had this question ready to go about Trump attacks judge after verdict, calls him tyrant and a devil. That was ready to go. They had to produce this segment, and to have that up on the screen, the producers there, by putting that down in the bottom of the screen, the banner, the chiron, they're telling you what to think. They're leading the witness, if you will. They're trying to tell you how to feel about Donald Trump and about how to, they're giving, it's kind of like at a talk show. If there was a live audience here, there would be people who would be audience preppers, right? And their job would be to hold up banners, as things say, applause, laugh, right? Like when you watch Bill Maher, for example, he's got plants in his audience who obviously clap or laugh really loud and all that kind of stuff. This is kind of like the equivalent of that from the mainstream media. These banners are telling you how to feel, how to think, what to think, right?
Between Judge Merchan and the defendant he was sitting in judgment over, it's head-scratching, to be honest, that he didn't step down off of this case.
Are you concerned that the continuing attacks on Judge Merchan and the attacks on witnesses like Michael Cohen is going to actually make sentencing worse for the former president?
I think it's really important to note that President Trump is running for president of the United States of America, and he has an absolute constitutional right to comment on matters of public importance. And unfortunately, this trial, which was, I believe, unjustly inserted into the presidential election cycle, is a matter of tremendous public importance. The weaponization of our legal system, the politicization of prosecution, these are all things that President Trump absolutely has to comment on. I think the fact that he labored under a gag order for as long as he did was manifestly unjust. So yes, absolutely, President Trump needs to be carrying his message to the American people, and I don't see how anyone can really poke holes at that.
You talked about the weaponization of the legal system. Of course, it was former President Trump who, throughout the 2016 campaign, led chants of "lock her up" about Hillary.
Okay, now you see, again, the gloves are off here. Stephanopoulos is, a former Clinton hack, ran interference for the Clinton White House for years, has always been a lapdog for the Clinton campaigns when they were running, and still is today, as you can see from this interview. Trump led the charge with the chance "lock her up." You might think, oh, well, that's a slam dunk, and, the soccer moms who are watching this who are like, they probably think that George has got him here, but watch Will Scharf again play the reverse card.
Hillary Clinton. But what do you expect from the sentencing process?
Well, but hold on a second, George. President Trump may have said that, but after he entered office, he certainly didn't weaponize the Department of Justice to pursue his political opponents the way that we've seen President Trump and his political allies act in the last couple of years.
And wasn't that a mistake? Right? Wasn't the mistake there that Donald Trump didn't weaponize the DOJ against the enemies of the American Republic? Not just his enemies, but your enemies, my enemies, our enemies as well, the enemies of freedom itself. Donald Trump's mistake was that he let them slip away. He thought that being magnanimous in allowing his enemies to slip away across the borderlands, that they wouldn't come back and, bomb our trade centers 10 years later or what have you. This just goes to show that when you have the terrorists under your thumb, you kill them mercilessly, you squash them, you pull a Kristi Noem on them.
Remember, this case in New York, it was called the zombie case. It sat and sat and sat. It could have been brought at any point after 2020. And then suddenly, when President Trump announced his campaign for president, was dusted off, rushed in front of a grand jury, and then rushed into court. You want to talk about the politicization of the legal system? I mean, this is Exhibit A. It's absolutely unprecedented in American history. It's not the way that our campaigns are supposed to be run. We contest elections at the ballot box, not in the courts in this country.
That is true, but of course, we've never had a former president or a presidential candidate facing the kind of charges that the president faced because of his own activities. And of course, the Attorney General in Manhattan has nothing to do with the Department of Justice. Finally, what do you expect?
Oh, now here, watch this. Now, George Stephanopoulos just thought that he laid the smackdown on Scharf with this statement, and then he thought he was going to move on. Now, Will and I have never trained in karate together, but I'll tell you, he knows his verbal judo well. This is democracy manifest. Watch this. I'm going to pull it back just a minute. I want you to see how Stephanopoulos thinks that he's going to throw a curveball or a sinker across home base. But Scharf is just going to he's going to watch it the whole time, and then he's going to pick it up from the drop and just slam it. Grand slam. Watch this. Let me back this up again. Watch how Scharf responds to Stephanopoulos'
the courts
jab.
In this country.
That is true, but of course, we've never had a former president or a presidential candidate facing the kind of charges that the president faced because of his own activities. And of course, the Attorney General in Manhattan has nothing to do with the Department of Justice. Finally, what do you expect from the sentencing process?
I vehemently disagree that the district attorney in New York was not politically motivated here, and I vehemently disagree that President Biden and his political allies aren't up to their necks in this prosecution. I think the fact
there's
that
no
the Biden
evidence of that,
campaign was,
sir. There's no. I'm not going to let you continue to say that. There's just zero evidence of that.
Well, how about the fact that Matthew Colangelo
is
was standing over Alvin Bragg's shoulder when he announced this verdict? I mean, Colangelo was the number 3 official in the Biden Department of Justice who suddenly disappears and shows up as an assistant district attorney right as Trump's case in New York starts to proceed.
After
you want to talk about political you want to talk about political coordination?
This has nothing
George,
to do.
Right
this has nothing to do. No, it's not. This has nothing to do with President Biden. Do you want to answer the question about the sentencing process or not?
Oh, geez, this was George knows that he got because he comes across and says that he says, I'm not going to let you try and say that the Biden White House or the Department of Justice under the Biden administration had anything to do with this case in New York. But Will has done his homework, and he knows that the number 3 high-level official in the Department of Justice under the Biden administration suddenly disappeared from the Department of Justice and then reappeared in the New York court that then tried Donald Trump. Oh, certainly. I'm sure that the Biden administration had nothing to do with that little turnaround. Let's watch it again because Stephanopoulos is he's almost trying to silence Will Scharf. Don't you speak the truth? How dare you? You bring somebody onto the platform. It's kind of like the old remember Hannity and Combs? Or what was it? No, what was it? It was Bill O'Reilly back in the day in the Fox News. They were like, shut up, cut his mic. This is the George Stephanopoulos equivalent of that. Let's back it up one more time. Watch this. There's so many subtle details in this and how Scharf handles this interview that we need. Oh, by the way, Jay Ashcroft's running about 5 minutes later, so he'll be here soon. So let's go ahead and continue to break this down as we go out.
It's not politically motivated here, and I vehemently disagree that President Biden and his political allies aren't up to their necks in this prosecution. I think the fact
there's
that
no
the Biden
evidence of that,
campaign
sir. There's no. I'm not going to let you continue to say that. There's just zero evidence of that.
Well, how about the fact that Matthew Colangelo was standing over Alvin?
There's zero evidence of that. Watch Will Scharf drop
Brad's
the evidence.
shoulder when he announced this verdict. I mean, Colangelo was the number 3 official in the Biden Department of Justice who suddenly disappears and shows up as an assistant district attorney right as Trump's case in New York starts to proceed.
After
you want to talk about political you want to talk about political coordination?
This has nothing.
See, George just is like, he knows he got. God, it's a beautiful moment. We got to give this up for Will. Fellow Missouri boy. Will's running for Attorney General of the state of Missouri, by the way.
This has nothing to do. No, it's not. This has nothing to do with President Biden. Do you want to answer the question about the sentencing process or not?
I completely disagree that this has nothing to do with President Biden. With respect to sentencing, as I said before, we're going to vigorously challenge this case on appeal. I don't think President Trump is going to end up being subject to any sentence whatsoever, and we look forward to getting this case into the next court and taking this again all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary to vindicate President Trump's rights.
Thanks for your time this morning.
Appreciate it, George.
He couldn't take it anymore. That's my boy right there. Hey, guess what? Will Scharf is actually going to be on this show on Monday. So it's 7:30 a.m. Central this coming Monday. Will Scharf himself will be on the show. Where else do you get such highly relevant news coverage with a little bit of a bisexual lighting to go along? Barney Stiles says, George, you ignorant slut.
How dare you?
We're so thankful and glad to have you here. Jay Ashcroft will be here any minute now. They just texted me, said they're running a few minutes late, which means AP gets the tap dance. But maybe this is a good time for me to remind you that if you'd like to see today's mini documentary bonus content, we are, well, perhaps running a little bit behind on when we typically like to be able to see that we're starting to raise enough money, donations, or purchases at apforlibertyshop.com in order to unlock today's mini documentary. The theme this week for the bonus content is political concepts that changed the world. And today's is super interesting, so you don't want to miss it. One listener actually just went to apforlibertyshop.com and bought themselves some awesome merch over at AP for Liberty Shop. So you just actually got pretty darn close to unlocking the mini documentary. So $49, $50, $51. We are $51 towards the $60 goal of the mini documentary. If you guys would like to see that instead of commercials as we go through breaks, then make sure that you get those Rumble Rant donations in right now. We are going to go to a brief little commercial break because the man has just entered the studio. Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft walking onto the set. We're going to hear from him in less than 5 minutes. Don't go away. We'll hear about his campaign for governor, where he stands on the Trump trial, and that travesty of justice on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Expansive time, a year might seem like a mere moment, but oh, what a year it's been. In September 2022, Austin and Stephanie Peterson embarked on a journey to wake up America. They began humbly, with just 20 souls tuning in, learning, listening, and though challenges arose, like the looming shadow of YouTube demonetization, their spirit never waned. And now, thanks to you, thousands rise with the sun to join them, to listen, to engage, to be a part of a community. So here's to you, and to Wake Up America, for memories shared, for friends made, for the journey ahead, and for never, ever forgetting to rise and freedom. Happy anniversary.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message. Believe me, Austin Peterson is the best. He's got the greatest Wake Up America show I've ever seen. Whenever I tune in the mornings and watch the live stream, let me tell you, he has got the absolute best content. I love his guests. It's just a total blast to watch, and I highly endorse and recommend the Wake Up America show. It's terrific, believe me.
Is the outdoor your home about as exciting as a library? Then spice it up and unbore your space with our custom metal signs. Crafted with love and a bit of libertarian magic, you can customize your own metal sign at apforlibertyshop.com. So head to apforlibertyshop.com. Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. Thanks for sticking around. We're glad to have you here. Boy, that was an epic takedown by Missouri Attorney General candidate Will Scharf, Trump lawyer, taking George Stephanopoulos to the woodshed. He pulled a Kristi Noem on that lapdog for the Clintons. Joining us live in studio to discuss that right now is Missouri Secretary of State and candidate for governor of Missouri, Jay Ashcroft. Good morning, Jay. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Great to be on.
We're glad to have you here, Jay. You're running for governor of the state of Missouri. We're going to get to that in just a moment. I know you didn't see the interview that Will Scharf had with George Stephanopoulos, but I bet you can imagine how it went.
Yeah, I read about it, and look, it's having a battle of wits with an unarmed man when you're Will Scharf has got to be fun. But, you know, Stephanopoulos is just a partisan hack. He doesn't care about the truth. He cares about misleading people. And Will has been in a tough position. I don't know when he sleeps, but a great position of actually getting to fight back against all the lawfare and against all the attempts to stop Donald J. Trump from being president again. And the best part is they're going to fail at that. We're going to reelect him, and this country's going to get back on the right course.
Jay, talk to us about the charges against Donald Trump that are being made specifically against in New York. And then if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about some of the other cases as well?
Well, normally I'd love to fully explain the charges, but they were never fully explained in the court. In any criminal case, it's expected that the prosecutor has to define every element of the crime, exactly what you supposedly did that was wrong, so that you as the defendant can refute that, and then the jury has to unanimously agree on that. But in that case, the judge went so far as to say, well, we really don't know what this underlying crime is that supposedly he was trying to hide. So if you think he did something wrong and you think he did something wrong, that's good enough for me, even if you don't agree on it. How do you present a defense when you're not even allowed to know what it is supposedly you did? How are you allowed to defend yourself against someone telling you that you committed an election offense when the judge refuses to allow you to bring in your expert witness, who's one of the biggest experts on election law, to explain why it's not a crime? And then when the judge says, don't worry, I won't let the prosecutor talk about it, and you can't have that witness, when you're done with your case and the prosecutor is doing their final statements, they repeatedly say, well, we knew he violated this because of this. He didn't even bring up evidence against it because the judge wouldn't let him.
Now, talk to us about the situation. If Donald Trump is sentenced in July and is required to go to jail, and then it has to report to jail, let's say on
his polling goes up by 3 points.
His polling goes up, but I mean, it's not like there isn't precedent. I mean, you can run for office. I mean, if you got arrested right now, you're running for governor. I mean, you could still run for governor, and if you won, you could still be governor from the Missouri State Penitentiary is shut down. But I guess where do they take you? Cole County.
Donald Trump is just, Reagan used to talk about that happy warrior. Donald Trump just keeps, as I say, left foot, right foot. He just keeps marching. Everything they throw at him, going after him in D.C., going after him in Georgia, going after him in New York. And he's like Godzilla. When they throw everything at him, he just keeps going. And it's amazing to me that he has been there, that he understands what a mess it is, that he understands that when you're in the presidency, all these people that are supposed to help you, the Republicans, didn't help him, and yet he's still willing to continue to go through all of this, not for the money. He lost money as president, but he's willing to do it for the people of this country because he sees the need. He's heard the call. I don't know anyone else that could do it, that would do it, and that would do it with, frankly, the grin on his face that he has so often. I'm astounded. He's going to be the next president. It's going to be in spite of what they're trying to do in New York and everywhere else. It's going to be because the people of this country realize that what is going on is wrong. They realize that our current president hates America, hates American exceptionalism, and that Donald Trump will go in there and burn at least some, if not all of it, down. And that's what we need.
We're speaking to Missouri Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft here on the Wake Up America show. We're glad to have him here on set. If you have a question for him, you can send us a text at 573-319-1586. He's currently running for governor of the state of Missouri. He's in a three-way race with Senator Bill Eigel and with Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe. What sets you apart from these two candidates, Jay?
History of actually moving conservative policies forward. The problem we have with our state and with our government is we have so many people that say it's not the big government is the problem, it's who's running the big government. And Tax Hike Mike and Senator Eigel, they think that if they're in charge of the government, they can run big government well. But the truth of the matter is, and I think your listeners know this, you know this, big government is inherently wrong. Yes, we have bad leadership, but the fundamental underlying problem is that government is too big. Government is the problem. I mean, really, the only great form of government is mom and dad. And I didn't always agree with that when I was a teenager.
Speaking of dad, my dad's just tuning in right now. Good morning, Dad. Thanks for the shirt that you got for me today. We appreciate that. That's what we're wearing today. And we're glad to hear from our audience members this morning. Anytime, if you have a question, at 573-319-1586. Now, you called Mike, you called him Tax Hike Mike. Why?
Well, because he has a record of wanting to hike taxes on the people of Missouri. He's been involved in politics in Jeff City for, 2 decades. And he's always found that if he takes your tax dollars and trades it for favors from lobbyists in the swamp, he gets campaign donations. So, I mean, over and over again, he's been part of raising taxes in Missouri. The largest tax increase in the history of the state happened 3 years ago. And the lieutenant governor was the main reason, because he was going around threatening to have the governor veto legislation if it passed, threatening to kill legislation in the Senate, not just if they didn't vote to pass it, but if they even had the audacity to let the people have a say in whether or not they pass the tax increase.
There's a lot of grassroots support for Senator Bill Eigel out there. He's advocating for the kind of tax cuts that I definitely want to see, Jay. I want to see personal property
tax. But he spent 8 years in the legislature when they doubled the size of the budget. This is what Ronald Reagan talked about when he gave his time of choosing speech 60 years ago this fall. Are we going to be a party of small government, or are we going to be the party that doubles government? Are we going to be the party of low taxes, or are we going to be the party that has passed the largest tax increase in the history of the state? We've got to quit electing people that say the right thing in even-numbered years, but do the wrong thing when they're actually there legislating. I mean, we have legislators that are saying, oh, we believe in tax cuts. Then why did you allow the largest tax increase in the history of the state? If you could filibuster initiative petition reform, which you've done multiple times, you could have filibustered the largest tax increase in the history of the state.
Now, what about the veteran question? Because, I'm asking people around Jefferson City in casual conversation, what about, how do you feel about Jay Ashcroft or Bill Eigel or Lieutenant Governor Kehoe? And one of the concerns that I've had were some comments that you had made about veterans at an event that I think got misconstrued. But I didn't quite understand what the beef was. Maybe you can help us understand, explain.
I probably wasn't as articulate as I could have been. And I'm an engineer. I'm not a politician. I focus on fixing the problem, not fixing the blame. We would not have this country without our veterans. I mean, look, it's D-Day. Think of the sacrifice that they gave. I don't remember if it's true or not, but I was talking earlier this morning about the France telling the United States that they wanted every American military individual out of their country after the war. And the U.S. responded with, does that include the cemeteries? And I think the French shut up pretty quickly. We live in the world we live in. We live in the greatest country on the face of the earth. We're allowed to have podcasts like this. We are free because young men and women signed blank checks to Uncle Sam, and I am grateful for that. We need to support them. We need to remember the promises we made to them. We need to be giving them the health care we owe them. We need to be giving them the mental health care we owe them. We need to be funding our veterans' homes. I'm seeing data right now that says we may need to shutter a veterans home in 1 or 2 years because we may be 60 to 70 million in the red with that. That's ridiculous. That will not happen when I'm governor. And, look at people that are even on active duty. We have individuals on active duty where their families have to be on public assistance. That's morally reprehensible. These men and women are standing up. Sometimes in the middle of the night, they are walking the line. They are running into danger for us, and we won't pay them what they're worth. We should be ashamed of that.
We're speaking to Missouri Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. He's running for governor of the state of Missouri. He's in a three-way race. We're getting questions from our listeners at 573-319-1586. Our local friend, Andy Opperman, sometimes we might see him at the Hy-Vee down the street, Jay, is asking how you're going to be able to cut the budget and the spending here in Missouri.
Well, one of the great things about Missouri is the governor has the line item veto. So the governor has the ability when the budget is passed to actually take individual items and say, no, we're not going to spend the money on that. And anybody that wants to look at the budget, you can see just over and over and over and over again, there are disbursements of tax dollars to private organizations because some senator or some representative wants that to happen. I mean, there was $3 million that was put in my budget for a certain library in Missouri. And I said, wait a minute, why do they need this? They didn't talk to me. I don't want to spend this. Get this out of my budget. They took it out of my budget, and then they put it back in another budget bill. That's the sort of thing that right off the bat you can say, we're not going to fund those. The core responsibilities of government, in my view, we're under our Constitution, we're required to provide funds for education. I believe we have to do roads, bridges, and inland waterways. We're doing a terrible job with inland waterways. And then we have to do public safety. Beyond that, show me why we ought to be spending taxpayer money on that. I believe that taxpayers know better how to spend their money than the government does. We've seen, 8 or 9 other states are getting rid of their income tax right now. They're on the path. They don't do it overnight. So it can be done. And we've seen, House Budget Chair Cody Smith, year after year, has had smaller budgets than the Senate wanted. And then he's lost when the Senate comes back and the governor supports the higher budgets. When you have a governor that's willing to say, no, this year our goal was to cut spending by 10%.
Okay, we're running out of time. So no, it's okay. We're running out of time. I want to make sure that this is gonna be a little more rapid fire, Jay. I might cut you off on things. School choice, yes or no?
As long as you dismantle DESE, parents should be in charge.
So if you dismantle DESE, you will sign school choice if it passes here.
Yes, legislation's ready. I want parents in charge of how the money's spent, how their children are educated.
Okay, when we were at the Missouri Republican Convention in Springfield recently, Jay, people were cheering like crazy for paper ballots here in the state of Missouri. Seems a little antiquated, but people don't trust it.
It's already the law in the state of Missouri. The official ballot of Missouri is the paper ballot. I got that done in 2022.
Okay, so election integrity in the state of Missouri, you're feeling confident?
It's good. I wish we would require proof of citizenship to register to vote. I wish the legislature would pass a law mandating hand counting of paper ballots. I wish we would increase our audits, and we need more people involved to be poll workers, poll challengers, and poll watchers.
Okay, your opponent, Eigel, has said that not only should we not allow...
He says a lot of stuff.
Not only should we not allow China to be able to buy up Missouri farmland, but he has said that we should not allow any foreign nation...
Let me jump in there. Okay. He said that,
yes.
But when it came down time to vote, he voted to allow any foreign government around the world to buy any amount of land they want in our state, and even to specifically allow them to use it for genetic research on human beings.
Okay, so my beef with what Eigel was saying when he came on the show was that he said that, we've got a Hitachi plant across the river here, which creates a lot of jobs, good paying jobs for Jeffersonians here, and he basically wants to force them to divest the ownership of their land. We've got Bayer, German company.
I think he wants to spend a ton of taxpayer dollars to China, because that's what we have to do under the Takings Clause of the U.S. Constitution. What I've supported is let's stop the bleeding. Anytime someone's injured, you stop the bleeding, and then let's see how we move forward. But what really gets me is the hypocrisy of someone that's voted to sell our land to our enemies and anyone else. Even the communist Chinese government, under what he voted for last year, they could buy our land. I'm the only one that has steadfastly and always stood up to protect our land.
The people of Missouri will have on their ballot a question about abortion, it appears, because of the initiative.
The signatures are being checked right now, yes.
Okay, and so your take on that one and the initiative petition.
I stand for life. I'm endorsed by Missouri Right to Life. You cannot have any freedoms if you are not allowed to breathe and live. It's life, then you get liberty and the pursuit of happiness. We have to protect life.
Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft stands for life. Thanks so much for watching the interview, Jay. Is there anything else that you think? Oh, actually, one last question. This is like the more hot button social issue topics. There are a few questions related to the protection of minors in this state. There was a big scandal out in St. Louis about a hospital that was involved in the transitioning of minors. It
was the castration of minors. It was chemical mutilation.
Surgical mutilation. Would you sign a bill that would outlaw the chemical and surgical?
Yes, and I wouldn't allow it just to have a sunset of 5 years. In fact, I was the only statewide official that testified in favor of it 2 years ago when they moved the meeting so people didn't have a chance to testify.
Transgenders in women's sports.
Not allowed.
Not allowed.
There's men, there's women, and there's co-ed. That's what we have in sports. It's worked for centuries.
There we go. Jay Ashcroft, is there anything else that you'd like to say to the good people of the United States or around the country that we missed?
Hit Ashcroft from Missouri to learn more. I'm the only candidate for governor that actually has plans on how to reduce taxes, on how to increase public safety. We're continuing to roll those out. Reach out. Let me know how I can do a better job.
There we go. Jay Ashcroft. He is Missouri Secretary of State, now running for governor. Oh, by the way, who are you endorsing for your replacement?
Donald J. Trump.
Oh, for Secretary of State in Missouri?
You know, I'm focused on the governor's race right now and watching what they do. I'll make up my mind later on.
There you go. He's running for governor. Will you vote for him? Let us know. Send us a text. Let's give Jay Ashcroft a round of applause and say thank you very much. All right, Mr. Secretary, free to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we appreciate you very much. Well, thanks to all of those purchases people made at apforlibertyshop.com. You guys, we're going to go to a break in just one moment. You'll be able to walk out in just one moment. The Wake Up America show bonus content was unlocked thanks to all the generous donations from listeners and viewers just like you. So that means we're going to go to a break, enjoy the bonus content. When we get back, we'll get ready for Camellia Peterson, talk about something a little lighter, a little bit more fun, like a study, a real research study that showed the hotter the flight attendant is, the more likely she is to give you good service. I wonder why. On the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Wake Up America show mini documentaries are centered around the theme of political concepts which make the world go round. Today's bonus content, we deal with the issue of regulatory capture. Regulatory capture is a concept where regulatory agencies favor the interests they regulate over the public's. This theory suggests that agencies end up serving the industry rather than the public. George Stigler introduced this theory in the 1970s, highlighting how industries intensely focus on influencing regulations that affect them. Stigler pointed out the imbalance of influence between organized industries and the general public, who are less likely to engage intensely with regulators. Industries have substantial budgets for influencing regulators, contrasting sharply with the limited resources individuals use to defend their interests. This disparity is rooted in the economic principle of concentrated benefits versus dispersed costs, affecting public policy and collective action. Often, regulators are drawn from the industry they oversee due to their specialized knowledge and may return to it post-tenure. This creates a revolving door of personnel between government and industry. Sometimes industry promises of future employment for regulators can corrupt the regulatory process. When an agency serves as an advocate for the industry it regulates, it is considered a captured agency, operating without direct corruption but influenced by industry perspectives. Even advocacy groups like the Sierra Club, which push for strict regulations, are outmatched financially by industry groups. Regulatory capture is seen throughout various industries and historical periods, as regulations can inadvertently protect established firms by raising barriers for new entrants. Regulations often increase market entry costs, requiring new firms to comply with burdensome rules that favor existing players. This keeps small business small and big business big. In extreme cases, regulatory capture leads to deregulation that benefits the regulated entities, while maintaining barriers that hinder competitors. In the transportation sector, the U.S. railroad industry in the late 19th century is a classic example of regulatory capture, where regulation facilitated cartel-like conditions. Similarly, in the finance sector, regulatory bodies are often filled with industry insiders who prioritize industry interests, which contributed to the financial crises of the late 2000s. Obamacare was another example, where insurance industry executives were involved in the crafting of the law and then exited the administration to work for the companies they wrote the law in favor of. However, some economists argue that regulatory capture is overstated, citing industries like fossil fuels, where regulation has sometimes reduced profits despite intense lobbying efforts. Understanding regulatory capture is crucial for ensuring that agencies act in the public interest rather than serving the industries they are supposed to regulate. Of course, for libertarians, the bureaucracies of the federal government that regulate industry are expected to be abolished, as Javier Milei has done in Argentina.
Had a sinking feeling that you were right, saying I'm not seeing all the lies that I made myself believe that seem to divide us. Once in my life, moving on towards feeling sets in the silence, in the silence, in the silence, in the silence.
Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. I'm Austin Peterson. We're glad and thankful to have you here. It's time to rise in freedom. Cecilia is joining us live over on the Rumble chat. She says that was interesting. She might need to listen to that documentary again, just so she understands it a little better. But it sounded like how lobbyists are the ones really controlling the government and not the people. Well, Big brain show for big brain people, Cecilia. Absolutely. Regulatory capture, that mini documentary that we just watched, is basically the tendency for bureaucracies that are supposed to regulate an industry get staffed by people from that industry, and then they end up controlling it so that that industry only has the friends of that industry in the government, and then those friends in the government protect that industry from any outside competition. They call that regulatory capture. And I will play that mini documentary again because you guys have made so many purchases at apforlibertyshop.com. Oy vey. You've earned it for sure. Thanks so much for all that financial support. It's really helping us to feel a lot more at ease with the coming of the child, the chosen one, the baby, which will be coming any day soon. Probably about 6 weeks from now. But you never know with these things. So if all of a sudden AP is like, gotta go, gotta run, might be out for 2 or 3 days. So again, thanks for all those donations and the purchases at apforlibertyshop.com. Not only do they help to feed a growing Liberty family, but they also help us to invest in more content so we can do amazing interviews with boring trad wife / mom / feminist like my next guest, Camellia Peterson, who apparently doesn't have a lot of fans from her area, her region in Southwest Missouri. I need to start doing some booking, apparently, Camellia.
I know. You should find better quality guests, Austin, for Pete's sake. You can't please everyone, right? That's okay. Like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea.
We're getting all this unsolicited advice from people who don't like us, who don't wish us well, who don't want us to do well. And they tell us, oh, this is what you should do. It's like that guy yesterday who was talking about the bisexual lighting here on the Wake Up America show.
He's a brand guy, Austin.
He's a brand guy. Yeah. And all of his people that he supports don't exist, and none of them are searchable on the internet. But he's just, he's so successful and huge. He wants to help us succeed. It is amazing when you get unsolicited advice from people who like tell you things like that. Obviously, he was just trolling. He doesn't care about us. But I mean, you do get that kind of scenario where like people are like, this is what you should do. I don't want you to actually succeed, but definitely follow my advice. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Everybody is an expert anymore, right? So, but one thing I will say in Justin's favor, even if he doesn't hate me, right?
Right,
but
he
would rather watch anything else. But in his bio, I noticed it said passively aggressive, and I would just like to say, like, kudos to Justin, because what he did was not passive aggressive, and I respect somebody that just says what they think, even if it's something that I might not want to hear. That's okay.
Exactly. It wasn't passive aggressive. It was just straight up aggressive. Didn't like it. But if you do like Camellia, make sure you click that like button on the stream. Camellia joins us Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 a.m. Central Time as our regular guest. And that's not going to change, because here's the thing. And the reality is, and we're going to move off this subject, but the reality is, Camellia, is that like the show is becoming successful. We are getting a bigger audience. We are making more money, and we are like growing by leaps and bounds. So it's like, I would be stupid to like stop wearing silly shirts and having bisexual lighting and having my regular guests. You know what I'm saying?
If it works, right?
Absolutely. There's this book called Guerrilla Marketing, which I highly recommend. And they talk about things like people who watch your show regularly or people who consume your marketing regularly are the people who get bored by it the fastest and who will tell you to change things, right? What you should do is do this. I'm getting tired of the sound effects, blah, blah, blah. But like the Marlboro Man is a perfect example of marketing that went on for years and years, and nobody knew what the Marlboro Man was until one day he was just iconic. But if you have good marketing, you have to keep spending, you have to keep pushing it, you have to keep trying it, right? Because of what happens is that eventually all the new customers, all the people who have never seen it before, like people who have never seen the Wake Up America show before, are going to tune in and be like, oh, wow, this is really fun. I've never seen this before. I've never heard those sound effects before. I've never, experienced that before. But it's funny because you would think, listen to the people who are closest to you, who watch the show all the time, or who consume your cigarettes all the time, or what have you. But the truth is that if you do that, you change your marketing, you may miss a brilliant opportunity because you changed your marketing before you were the Marlboro Man. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes. Give yourself time to be classic.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. All right, Camellia, speaking of classic, boy, when I was a little boy, it was like the very end of the heyday of the golden age of flight. And I'd get on a flight, but specifically back more when I was single. And there's just something about a hot flight attendant that makes you just feel at ease. You know, have you experienced that, Camellia? Have you ever been on a plane and you had like a bunch of frumpy, ugly flight attendants, and you're just kind of like, it makes you feel uncomfortable. But then you're on another flight, say on the way home, and it's all these beautiful people, and you're just like, I feel like I'm getting a better quality of service. Well, that might not just be a feeling; that might actually be the case.
I don't know that I have like had that conscious thought, you know, when I've been flying, but it doesn't, like, there probably is something to it, because we've talked about this before. There have been psychology studies where, you know, you talk about whether it's in any kind of job setting or customer service setting, that people just do, they assume better things of more attractive people, right? They make better assumptions about them, that their perception is better as far as what they're receiving. And, you know, you get to a certain point where that starts to fall apart. But I do think that we naturally have that bias. One of the things, by the way, in this study that I like, you know, of course, I'm instantly thinking about all of the questions about the study. I couldn't see, you know, everything they used, but I also kind of have to wonder too, you know, with the examples that they showed to people that of the flight attendants on the plane, did they were they smiling? Were the less attractive people not smiling? And there's a whole lot to be said for, you know, their demeanor too, because you can have somebody, if you have somebody, even if they're not as attractive, but they have a very, you know, open, happy demeanor, like you respond to that, right? If they have a good sense of humor, you know, that kind of offsets maybe the beauty factor.
Be for sure, but I mean, I think there is something to it. Oh, hold on one second. I'm getting a little audio bleed. 1 second, Camellia, hold on. I've got some audio piping in. Oh my God. That's why I hate turning on the Fox News website, because it always forces that video on you. Okay. So why are we even talking about this, Camellia? I mean, this isn't something that I just brought up out of my, you know, pulled from my butt, right? So this is an actual article from researchers that did a study that said that airline passengers believe they receive better customer service from attractive flight attendants. So, I mean, it's not like there isn't a little bit of research done behind it.
Right. And one of the interesting things to me was where the study was done. I don't know if you caught that, but it was done in Turkey. And so I would expect that perceptions in Turkey may be a little bit different than maybe perceptions in the US. But when we have this whole conversation, you know, in America, especially about, you know, DEI and, you know, all of the, you know, accepting everybody and giving people special preferences for not being attractive, or, you know, all of these other physical traits, then I think it, you know, it forces something into a business that is, well, it's kind of anti-free market, anti-capitalism, right? And so I was also thinking about this in terms of, would people view their pilot in the same way? How would people view their pilot if she was this really attractive woman that had more of the flight attendant look? Because we have this perception about flight attendants, this kind of nostalgia, right? You know, because like you see the old pictures and like everybody smoking in the plane. And there's these airline stewardesses, you know, we call them stewardesses then, in mini skirts, and you know, they very much played up the physical beauty aspect of that. And so I think the interesting thing to me too was like, would we flip that around to pilots, and would people be comfortable? Would they consider that a safe, you know, capable pilot? or just capable of serving you drinks?
Camellia, hot flight attendants, ugly flight attendants. I mean, for me, I really think that the question is like about standards when it comes to quality of service. Like it's understood in like the club industry that if you're going to have a bottle girl, she's going to be a beautiful woman. She's going to be wearing a tight dress and all this kind of stuff. But it's funny because when it came to the flight attendants industry, there was for a while, it was kind of a controversy when we just started putting schlubby, you know, regular Joes into that into that scenario. But it's funny because you don't get the same. I mean, people will like, make it a cause that it's like, oh, we need to get regular looking normal people in flight attendant jobs. But nobody thinks that it's like you should put a fatty in the job of a bottle girl at a club. Why is it that there's this double standard, right? Where it's kind of like, and then for example, modeling jobs, they're putting these fat schlubs who look disgusting up there and saying, yeah, wear my Calvin Klein underwear, like all that stuff. So when you're looking at these advertisements, like it's like they're assaulting your eyes with ugliness. Why is it that we can kind of like understand that you better have a hot bottle girl at the club, but suddenly it's a cause and we need to have Jabba the Hutt serve you a drink on an airline? Why the double standard, do you think?
Well, I think at the club, they know they have to make money, and they're not going to make money if they change that. I mean, that's literally the free market at work in response to, basic human psychology and instincts. And I think, we have the companies, the corporations who are doing all these things like, the body acceptance and, all of these things, like that is political. They are responding to an agenda, and we have seen that backfire in some cases, in that, people don't necessarily want to see it. Now, do I think that, when you go to Amazon and you're looking up women's clothes or whatever, and, normally what they still do, they still put on the front page, they'll put the slender, attractive model, showing the clothes. But now in their carousel of pictures, they also will include pictures of those clothes on all different kinds of body types. Now, do I think that's okay? Sure. I think that that's probably smart, but it's not what they lead with. And they do that because there is so much money, an unbelievable amount of money people don't even think about, that goes into the psychology of marketing. And they know what sells.
Well, it's true. And here's the thing. For example, apforlibertyshop.com, whenever I create a new product, I have an opportunity to decide to choose from like maybe 7 or 8 or 9 different models for whichever t-shirt it is that day that I'm trying to promote. So I'll go ahead and just pull one up on the screen here, for example, so people can see what I'm talking about. See if I can find a picture of like a t-shirt. And the funny thing is that when I look at some of the models for some of these shirts, like I have to like choose from unattractive people, and there'll only be like modeling used to be an industry when I first started getting into the entertainment industry. It used to be like, you have to be beautiful. You got to like have these standards. And I understand that like people who have different body types, they're going to want to see somebody that looks like them to model for them. But listen, like you say, like making money and making sales, like I literally sit there and I think to myself when I'm like making some of these shirts and the models that they give me for this, I'm like, I can't put these people up here because they're ugly, they're unattractive, they're overweight. They're foisting minorities on me for a website that's obviously going to be populated mostly by white males, and then they won't even have a white male as a model.
Right.
It feels like white erasure. It feels like the Great Replacement. It feels like the conspiracy theories from the Nick Fuentes, the white people, bad. It feels like, the alt-right. It feels like, the National Socialists, the Jew haters. It feels as if, every once in a while that, when Vivek Ramaswamy brings up the white replacement theory, the Great Replacement theory, that it does feel as if, there is this sort of agenda that is being pushed on us from the fashion industry, from the airline industry, from big government, from big corporation, that is trying to get us to like this. There's this new Star Wars series that they've got coming out called The Acolyte, where it's like supposed to be the gayest Star Wars ever, and the Force is lesbian and it's only women, and it's kind of like, how long like do we have to like sit there and pretend as if like we don't have the knives out for us at all times?
Well, and by the way, can we point out that probably Latina women are an exception to that?
Well, I'd love a beautiful Latina woman for a model, but all I can get is a semi-attractive Asian dude.
Well, and you've also seen this in the gaming industry. I know you've talked about this before, where they're making the female characters in games that are marketed largely to men. And, the men are saying, like, what are you doing? So I think that, and when you talk about the Star Wars thing, that really, to me, that ends up being anti-feminist in a lot of ways. If you're talking about elevating women and saying what they are capable of, because in Star Wars, women have been, they've been able to do it all, right? But they've had that combination of femininity, but also, being able to go out there and fight and do all of those strong girl boss women things, right? But there's been a balance to it. And I think when they come in and they do this stuff, like with this latest Star Wars thing, that they make women look, weak and passive and just weird. Like it's anti-woman.
Well, what's funny is that, like, they don't, women, when it comes to women in Hollywood, they're not sending their best. The thing is it's like, it's sort of like the reason why white supremacy and like white nationalists, the reason why like reactionaries are on the rise, it's a response to leftist identitarianism.
Sure.
It's a response to what they're doing. So like the left creates this self-fulfilling prophecy where not only do they, because they have to pick a straw man, they call everybody a Nazi. They've sort of like, they've degraded it to the extent where when it comes to the female thing, it's like they say that the people hate women, they hate women, but it's kind of like, you're making us hate women because the women that you're putting up as icons are terrible people who are worthy of being despised. And if these are the best that you've got, send them back, right? Like, I don't know where these awful white liberal females came from, but like cast them back into the fires of Mount Doom where they came from. Like, God, save us from these cursed women who want to rule everything, who want to rule the land with an iron fist and a velvet glove, Camelia. For God's sakes, where are the women leaders that aren't disgusting pieces of shit?
Yeah. Yes. Where are the Margaret Thatchers, right?
Yeah. Where are the Margaret Thatchers? Yeah. Look what Kristi Noem like has become. You know what I mean? Like, I was really admiring her for some time. I thought she might be a good vice presidential pick and all this kind of stuff. Like, are our Republican women in Congress really impressing us, Camelia? Even our Republican women.
Well, they're impressing 50 Cent. Sorry.
Who's a woman in the United States that you admire, a leader that's out there really moving and shaking? Give me somebody, give me someone to look to some hope for your gender.
So immediately when I talked about Margaret Thatcher, you know who I thought of that is she's a lieutenant governor right now, is Winsome Sears. And I think that she is
Winsome Sears. Yes, there we go.
I think she's a great example of this because she is a woman who has been a very strong woman. She has served her country. She's had all these enormous accomplishments, but she has also, fought for the underprivileged. She's fought for veterans. She's, fought for people in the criminal justice system. And she is, she hasn't lost her femininity and her balance in doing that. And to me, I think that she just has that perfect balance that just reminds me of, Margaret Thatcher in a lot of ways too. So I think that they're out there, but the irony is that we have worked so hard to come from, our historical flaws of things like racism, that we swing in the other. We're so focused on getting rid of that we're doing more of it now. We've gone the other way. And I honestly think that happens because, in order to gain power, it feels like you have to keep people outraged about something.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So
Courtney Conover says, I think the bad women are the ones who want the attention and therefore seek the public spotlight. It's true. I know a lot of good women in my life, but they aren't the attention whores that so many of the ones who actually get the attention are the ones who manufacture the outrage in order to ensure that they have attention. Because if you can keep people angry, you can keep them focused.
And I think that speaks to probably deep-seated, insecurities in those women, and that they're constantly seeking that validation from all areas of their life. And so, they may look like they're girl boss women in charge and they've got it all together, but their behavior, says otherwise. They don't have that quiet confidence, so to speak.
All right, Camelia, let's move off of this topic onto something else. If you have a question for Camelia, you can send us a text at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. Don't forget to click that like button. And if it's your first time watching the Wake Up America show, this is Camelia Peterson I'm speaking to. She joins us live on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 a.m. Central, and that's not going to change. Speaking of girl bosses, Cracker Barrel CEO, young lady, CEO Julie Fels Messino, said the company had lost some of its shine, particularly in the post-pandemic age. Now, this is a great topic for where we're from in Missouri, because we got a lot of aging boomers who love them some Cracker Barrel, Camelia. They thought they would spice up the brand and bring in the young people by hiring a young girl boss who immediately said that the company is irrelevant and then tanked their stock. Congratulations, ladies. Another shining example of girl boss. She girl bossed a little too close to the sun. What's your take on this one?
Well, a little mixed, right? Okay, so I don't know. I'm not going to be feminist about this necessarily, but I will say
you better not be feminist, trad wife, mom about it.
She's not entirely wrong. And I think, one of the things that was pointed out was that their customer base declined significantly after the pandemic. And so, and their customer base is obviously the 65 plus crowd, right? That's the appeal. So the whole, the Cracker Barrel, scheme of the yellow and brown, and it does kind of remind you of the days of,
back in my days.
The burgundy and maroon, decor, and the blue with the geese, and
yes,
it's a little outdated. So I do think that they could probably use some freshening up. But one of the other things I was thinking about too is so I have a Cracker Barrel, and I rarely go, but my parents like it.
Of course they do.
So, but the one thing that I can think of that I like about Cracker Barrel is I like their pancakes, because if I'm going to eat pancakes, they have really good texture. They're not overly bready, and dry. Like they have good texture. And I think it's probably because they cook them in butter. But anyway, everything else on their menu is, Southern comfort food. And I really think that we are just culturally starting to move away from that. That's not as popular. I don't think it appeals to as many people overall. A lot of the restaurants that come up now are very often have their creative American cuisine, or they're a little different in some ways. And I like that because I like something different. But I think that, that those tried and true Southern staples just don't have as broad appeal as they used to.
Yeah, last year, and not this year, but last year, they thought that they would attract a younger crowd by putting out the gay rainbow flags for Pride Festival out there, which is funny because the LGBTQIA plus whatever community, now the rainbow flag is considered to be transphobic. Because if it doesn't include, the black people, the transgenders, the brown people, and all the, the Gaza flag and all that kind of stuff in it. So big mistake for Cracker Barrel to do it. But I mean, it's kind of like, how do I put this gently? You're not special just because you're a woman, right? You're not, nothing, you're not a genius. The problem is that our society is kind of telling you that you could do anything, you're a genius, girl boss, and all this kind of stuff. It's well, you're a strong, powerful, independent woman, and then they give you this job as CEO, and you're not qualified to do it. I mean, this is what happens when you have DEI, and you tell someone that they're special just because of their genitals, right? I mean, this is the backlash that you get. I mean, Cracker Barrel's reaping what they've sown in hiring a young girl boss to take things over. She puts the gay flag out there, the customer base bolts, and the stock tanks, right?
Right. Well, I mean, this is just absolutely a marketing principle of know your audience. And she was trying to make their audience be something other than it was. That's not their demographic. And I think this this applied to feminism is also sort of an outcome too of the idea of American exceptionalism, and people like, there is such a thing, I believe, as American exceptionalism, but I think people get it wrong sometimes in that there's this entitlement that's come, kind of in our current culture where people think that, oh, this is America, I can do anything that I want and succeed. And that's not what that principle is. It is you have the opportunity to pursue anything that you want to try to do. That's not a guarantee of your success. That does not automatically mean that you are capable of that or smart enough for that. And this absolutely is a cultural thing too, because, parents are like, my kid can do anything. And sometimes, I mean, you absolutely set kids up to fail whenever they think that they can not fail. That's why it's so important to let kids fail.
We need more good women leaders. We need fewer bad women leaders. I saw that there were some conservative women that I know who were praising the election of that socialist president of Mexico last week. They were like, oh, we need more women like this. When are we going to have a woman president of the United States? And it's like, the more you talk like that, the less likely it's going to happen, because guys like me are going to be like, you know what, ladies, you still have not come into the 21st century. You're still back in the suffragette period, and girl power, girl supremacy. And at the end of the day, like, Camelia, I can't vote for a woman for president of the United States when I hear that kind of rhetoric, because I know that you're not making decisions because you think, oh, here's somebody who shares my principles, my values. We're supposed to be on the same side. I mean, I know you and I are, Camelia, but I mean, like, conservative women, libertarian women, we're supposed to be on the same side here. And all I see is that as soon as there's any criticism of the little pretty princesses and the conservative side of things, they bolt for the exits. They run to the Democrats so fast the moment that anybody pops their bubble and tells them that maybe they're not special. Maybe you shouldn't be supporting the socialist dictator that just took over in Mexico and who is controlled by the cartels just because of what's between their legs. I mean, like, let's be honest, Camelia, would you vote for a woman for president right now with the state of our society as it is?
No, I am pretty sexist in that regard.
Misogyny.
And you know what?
No, we're clipping that. If Ken's watching right now, Liberty Shindig, make sure you clip that, brother. Why not?
Well, okay, so here's, this made me think about the Republican convention in the state, a month or so ago. And one of the things that happened during that, because, the fiasco with the credentialing and all of the things that delayed the whole thing, and it was kind of a disorganized mess. And I was sitting in the back in the observer section next to a woman who was like, everybody's frustrated. She was like, if they had women in charge, we could get things done. And so I was just kind of like, okay. And, and I was also kind of thinking, ma'am, the credentialing committee is all women. And also, I'm not going to name names, but I also later found out, I didn't realize that she's also running for a treasurer in Missouri. So I was like, wah,
wah. Yeah, maybe for state rep, for like lower positions or things like that. But no, definitely not for president of the United States. Not when I see conservative women who, as soon as there's any criticism whatsoever, they start running to the Democrats. They start threatening us, saying things like, well, if you keep talking like that about women, then you keep hurting our feelings, we're going to vote for the Democrats and stuff like that. It's like, well, we all knew that that's kind of what the problem was. That's kind of why the criticism is coming down the pike, is because you ain't no Margaret Thatchers over here, right? You're not iron ladies. You're soft, you're squishies, you're Twinkies, all right?
It's almost like we should be voting for people based on their qualifications rather than their looks, right?
Exactly. But if we're gonna play the game of voting for people who, because of their genitals, too, can play at that, and I'll be voting for the penis. Thank you very much, Camelia. Real quick, before we go, I got to go get Daniela. I'm sure she'll have a lot to say about that. The governor's race, I just had Jay Ashcroft on, and it's him, it's Bill Eigel, it's Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe. Have you picked a horse in this primary race yet?
I have. And for those who like, I know a lot of the Missouri people watching know that this is, I'm in grassroots engagement in the political circles. That's what I do all the time. So this is something I'm very familiar with and probably have a perspective that a lot of people don't get to have because, all you hear is what candidates say. And so, and a lot of people, I think in my position and otherwise, are hesitant to publicly declare what they think. But in transparency, that's, my thing. Yeah, I'm absolutely voting for Jay Ashcroft in this. And I will tell you that I think, we have three candidates who all have very positive aspects about them. There's one that I think is great personality-wise, leadership-wise, but I really differ on, some policy issues with. And then there are two that I think are great on policy issues, but I think that the biggest difference is going to come down to governing style, because I know that they fight is really important and you want to hear people rant and rave and scream, but if they cannot get into the legislature and down to the nitty gritty of the tedious, boring day-to-day work of it and actually work with the legislature to get things done, then you might as well forget it. They're not going to get anything done. And I will say, for Jay Ashcroft, not only do I like him on policy, and I really appreciate what he said about parents, and that's the smallest form of government. And I know he is passionate about, parents having rights over their children's education and is a huge school choice advocate. But I have been around this all over the state and at many, many, many events with Jay Ashcroft in his role of Secretary of State and otherwise. And I can tell you that I've never seen a candidate or an elected official go to as much effort as he does to be out there and connecting with people, and often the first to arrive, the last to leave. As long as somebody wants to talk to him, he will stay, until the end. And I really appreciate that about him. I think that's important.
There you go, Camellia Peterson. Follow her on X at Rare Camellia, at Rare Camellia. Here, she's not so rare. She joins us twice a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 8 a.m. Central Time. Camellia, anything else real quick before we go?
Nope, that's it. Oh, by the way, do your act of civil disobedience today. And speaking of, you were talking about regulations earlier, and if you have a flow restrictor in your shower head, go take it out.
Okay, there you go. I will do it. We need a heavy flow. Camellia, thank you very much for your time today. We'll see you soon.
Have a great day, everyone.
That's Camellia Peterson. All right, so now Daniela Pensack, she's waiting in the wings. I got to go get Daniela. Good news for you. You've unlocked the bonus content, so you get to watch today's mini documentary again instead of the commercials. I know you like that. We'll be right back with Daniela Pensack to talk about why young people aren't liberal when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com.
Wake Up America show mini documentaries are centered around the theme of political concepts which make the world go round. Today's bonus content, we deal with the issue of regulatory capture. Regulatory capture is a concept where regulatory agencies favor the interests they regulate over the public's. This theory suggests that agencies end up serving the industry rather than the public. George Stigler introduced this theory in the 1970s, highlighting how industries intensely focus on influencing regulations that affect them. Stigler pointed out the imbalance of influence between organized industries and the general public, who are less likely to engage intensely with regulators. Industries have substantial budgets for influencing regulators, contrasting sharply with the limited resources individuals use to defend their interests. This disparity is rooted in the economic principle of concentrated benefits versus dispersed costs, affecting public policy and collective action. Often, regulators are drawn from the industry they oversee due to their specialized knowledge and may return to it post-tenure. This creates a revolving door of personnel between government and industry. Sometimes industry promises of future employment for regulators can corrupt the regulatory process. When an agency serves as an advocate for the industry it regulates, it is considered a captured agency, operating without direct corruption but influenced by industry perspectives. Even advocacy groups like the Sierra Club, which push for strict regulations, are outmatched financially by industry groups. Regulatory capture is seen throughout various industries and historical periods, as regulations can inadvertently protect established firms by raising barriers for new entrants. Regulations often increase market entry costs, requiring new firms to comply with burdensome rules that favor existing players. This keeps small business small and big business big. In extreme cases, regulatory capture leads to deregulation that benefits the regulated entities, while maintaining barriers that hinder competitors. In the transportation sector, the U.S. railroad industry in the late 19th century is a classic example of regulatory capture, where regulation facilitated cartel-like conditions. Similarly, in the finance sector, regulatory bodies are often filled with industry insiders who prioritize industry interests, which contributed to the financial crises of the late 2000s. Obamacare was another example, where insurance industry executives were involved in the crafting of the law and then exited the administration to work for the companies they wrote the law in favor of. However, some economists argue that regulatory capture is overstated, citing industries like fossil fuels, where regulation has sometimes reduced profits despite intense lobbying efforts. Understanding regulatory capture is crucial for ensuring that agencies act in the public interest rather than serving the industries they are supposed to regulate. Of course, for libertarians, the bureaucracies of the federal government that regulate industry are expected to be abolished, as Javier Milei has done in Argentina.
Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. It's time to rise and freedom. Have you guys been enjoying the show today so far? Really glad I can just hit that applause button and make you agree with me. But if you actually agree with me, don't forget, click that like button yourself. And if it's your first time watching the Wake Up America show, we'd love to have you be a regular guest. Come back and join us every Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. It's a 2-hour Liberty tour de force. We'd be grateful to make your acquaintance and be a regular guest. If you're already a regular viewer of rumble.com, there's a great way to watch us whenever you're on the go. We want you to download the Rumble app. Make sure you download that Rumble app so you can watch us anytime you go. Once you download it, you're going to want to search for my channel, AP for Liberty, and follow the channel directly on the app. Now, that's going to make sure that you get a notification each time that you go live. So click the link in the description of the show today, or that's pinned in the live chat right now, to download the Rumble app on your phone. It's free, but if you prefer to watch the Wake Up America show on the big screen, it's also available for Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, Roku, LG, Samsung TVs. All you need to do is search for Rumble. And thank you for rumble.com for that little commercial break. We appreciate you very much. All right, so we've already been having a lot of fun with Camellia goofing on the ladies. I asked her if she would ever vote at this point, maybe not ever, but at this point, would she vote for one for president? She said no. Wow, what a misogynist. So we're done with that section. Let's bash on another part of the population. Young people, they always vote for liberals. They're leftists. They don't know their head from their tailbone. And maybe with one single exception, and that's my next guest, who we haven't seen in quite some time, Daniela Pensac. She's no liberal. Well, maybe in the classical sense. Good morning, Daniela.
Good morning, Austin. I'm so glad to be back to regular regular programming here in the show.
We missed you, Daniela. Everybody asked about you when you're gone. Thanks so much for coming back. You had an incredible tour of the southern United States. You got to see Fort Sumter. You got to visit all these memorials. You're a big history fan. Today is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, which we're all talking about this morning as well. So we're grateful to have another history nerd with us. But now we're going to talk about something a little bit more recent, which is this story that I saw yesterday. People were sharing around. I'm glad you brought it to me. Is that how young people might not be so liberal after all? What's the news?
Exactly. The media likes to polarize us and think that it's like super split and that, women and young people are really liberal, but that doesn't seem to be the case. A survey that has been done on college students between the ages of 19 to 30 revealed that it is actually pretty evenly split. With the survey, the one that I sent over to you, Austin, they tested a few things. First of all, they tested, then they surveyed people in their political affiliation, and it was like 30% conservative, 30% liberal, and then there was I think like 30% moderate, and then there was like peripherals of extremely liberal and extremely conservative. So it was pretty evenly split. But also really importantly, what the study has revealed is top policy issues for young people today. And there's this idea that the big media like CNBC, New York Times is posing is that young people are dropping their support for Biden because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But actually, what the survey reveals that that's not the case. Actually, that conflict is one of the least interest of young people in policy issues right now when it comes to voting. The number one issue that young people are really concerned about is economic issues, job growth, and healthcare. And when it comes to economy or economic policy, young people typically actually, at least what the survey has revealed, they align more with Trump. Whereas when it comes to more social issues like, LGBT or reproductive policy and all that, they sign more with Biden. So, but because economy and the economic policy seems to be the top issue for young people right now, it seems like they may be more aligned to vote with Trump right now. And but Joe Biden has been losing support steadily since 2020. So it's going to be a really tight race. It seems like it's going to be decided by the four key swing states, Georgia, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Arizona, I believe. And it seems to be young people will be the deciding demographic in this election. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, fascinating story, Daniela, and one that was actually kind of surprising to me because in recent weeks we've been reporting on, and I believe that maybe the last time you were on the show we talked about the split of the gender divide when it came to the ideological leanings between young men and young women, whereas young women are much more liberal than their mothers and their grandmothers were, and young men are more conservative than their female counterparts.
Right.
So does that play a factor into all of this? I mean, is there still like one doesn't cancel out the other? And if young people are less liberal, does that just mean that like young men's opinions are just overstated in this kind of a study? Or what's your take on that?
Women do typically vote more liberal, and young people are, like I'd mentioned, women, I believe they focus more on social issues, to be frank with you. And like the studies showed that young people, when it comes to social issues, they are more liberal. And that's just the case, and that seems to be the trend that we're heading towards, especially with like LGBT and all this. Um, but what the deciding factor, at least with as a policy issue in this election particularly, it seems to be economic policy. I do have a theory myself personally that I think abortion policy is also going to be a linchpin issue for this election cycle. And I really think the Republicans have dropped the ball on this. I think there needed to be more unified messaging on it, and Trump has attempted to do that. And I think that's going to be the deciding factor for young women especially. So they can salvage themselves. I think abortion policy is a big one that they have to approach with great ease, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, there clearly is a split between young men and young women. And I think when it comes to the sexes or the gender wars, it is more polarized. And I think enough surveys have revealed it is. But at least when it comes to young people as a whole, as a demographic, because you're factoring the male vote, it is kind of evenly split. And so I think the female vote can be salvaged, but it takes a few key issues to hone in on so we can, win them over.
If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. I'm Austin Peterson. I'm speaking to Daniela Pensack, where she is on the West Coast 2 hours earlier than we are. So click that like button as a show of gratefulness to Daniela for getting up so early this morning. We appreciate her sharing her report that she found on a new study that shows that young people are less liberal than we might be led to believe. Now, the questions that might be linchpins on this election, abortion, those are important domestic issues, Daniela. But what are some other issues that young people are talking about that are swinging their vote one way or another?
What the survey has revealed, like I mentioned, job growth, economic policy, healthcare. Those are the top three. There was peripheral ones like the Ukraine Russian war, the Israeli and Palestinian conflict also wasn't important, but again, it's not a deciding factor. Another thing this article mentioned, I forgot to mention already here, is that young people, they are more pro-Palestine than pro-Israel. And I think this is obvious, but it is not a determinative issue in the election. But it's a shame to see how the media is blowing it up like it is, right? Like this is why Joe Biden is losing. No, Joe Biden is losing the young vote because of his poor economic policy. Inflation was, I think, the top issue that young people were concerned with right now. So it also, they had a general sense, what the survey revealed also, is that young people, like everyone else, obviously see that he's not a cognitive individual. There's something lacking there, and they're afraid of that. They don't want the future of the nation to be put in the hands of someone that isn't all there. And so as far as the Democrat Party, I don't know what they're thinking with choosing Biden again. I think there's a lot of options. They chose him, very unusual, very strange. But that's kind of where we're at right now with young people. They're just as clear about our future as anyone else. They want a prosperous future, and what we have seen in the last, not just in the Biden election, the Biden administration, but for the last several years now, is that our economy is just not in the best place, and young people are primarily concerned with having a prosperous future, like anyone else.
Yeah, what's fascinating, when I used to work at the Fox News network in New York with Judge Napolitano, is that when it came to the stories that you would choose, I learned a lot about picking editorials in order to maximize your ratings for the television shows. So, and what you would find is that there would be certain topics that people would react to or relate to. And I'm actually working with a gentleman, Ken Milligan, who goes by Liberty Shindig online, and working with him on how to pick, topics for videos that he's creating for the Wake Up America Shows network. And it's fascinating because most people, when they say what they want, it's different from what they actually want, right? There's stated preferences and revealed preferences. And when it comes to the foreign policy question, people think, oh, well, because it's such a big story, it involves the death of children, and there's all these terrible pictures and photographs coming out of this conflict, and people are protesting on campuses, and it seems like there's like this conflict may play an outsized role. The reality is that if you watch people's behaviors in the media, which is their revealed preferences, not their stated preferences, people care a lot less about foreign policy questions than you might actually think. And it's hard for people like you and I, and probably the listeners of this show, and people who are hyper interested in politics, to understand kind of, to use a term, what normies really want or like or are interested in. But it's always the same things. It's economy, right? It's about, like those social issues like abortion, for example, things that actually impact them or might impact their daughters, right? Or impacting their, whether or not they're going to be able to make, their rent payment this month. And despite the fact that the mainstream media will sometimes voice those stories on us, whenever we would talk about foreign policy on the television shows, we would watch our ratings go down in real time. And it was kind of a fascinating study, because whenever I'm working with Ken on these videos, he's like, well, what about, here's the latest news on Gaza. And it's surprising because people would be shocked at how little Americans give a shit about what happens overseas. Americans don't care, right? Like, there's isolationism from like a political policy perspective, and then there's like a cultural isolationism. America is very much of a cultural supremacist. We aren't watching Chinese movies. We aren't watching, we aren't seeing what happens at a sports league in Namibia, right? Maybe some of us that are from the Latin American countries might watch soccer or the World Cup. But for the most part, we're focused on our own culture, our own interests. And so when you see young people listing off these desires, and what you had said earlier about, their relative lack of interest in Gaza compared to the other issues that matter, it makes perfect sense when you think about it. But most people wouldn't have assumed that. Now, I'd be curious, Daniela, now you're obviously, this is a self-selection bias. Obviously, you're a young conservative libertarian woman, and you're highly educated. So your opinion on this is going to be probably a little different from the median young person's opinion on it. But I'd be curious to get your personal take on what's being done to Donald Trump, specifically in the New York trial, for example, where he was just convicted of 34 felonies. Maybe sentenced to jail time. When I talk to the average normie young person on this, who isn't political, depending on kind of their own leanings, they'll be like, good, they finally got him, but they don't have any idea why or what it is or what it's about, right? What's your take on it?
That's exactly my opinion, Austin, is that no one seems to know. And and even the media is like not even talking much about it either, as far as like what he's charged with. there's no precedent for it. That's what everyone says. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with it. I think it's a great shame. And honestly, going back to what you're talking about with the foreign conflict issue, that I think that's why Donald Trump was so popular with his base and initially in 2016 is because he did bring a lot of emphasis back. He made it down to earth, right? He made it so people could understand, but he also brought it to a really pro-nationalist perspective and focusing on more domestic issues and helping the average American. And I think with his conversation on immigration policy and tariffs and all this. So he spoke to a lot of Americans and normies in a way that I don't think they were spoken to for quite some time. And so to see this happen to him, I think is like a good move for the GOP. People on the other side think that they really got him this time, right? No, I think this is one of the best things that could have happened to his campaign because it's just honestly, I thought the Trump campaign was kind of lackluster this time around. I thought first of all, I'm surprised why he ran it like again, and why this is occurring. And I didn't see that much enthusiasm this time around. You know what I mean? It's his third time running. Especially with the last election being a disaster as it was for Trump, I was surprised he ran again. But with this situation now, I think it's bringing in a lot. It's making it a more spirited race for him. And I think if I were a Democrat, I'd be kind of spooked right now, considering where things are going, especially with these what the study has revealed that young people are like steadily dropping their support, and they are a determinative base in the election. And if they're now probably going to turn more to Trump, seeing how what's happening to Trump, and again unless like you just watch CNN nonstop without a critical lens, I think your average American actually sees what's going on and see that it's pretty concerning and unfair.
Do you think that leftists, or maybe just liberals, if you will, do you think that they as enthusiastically run to the polls to vote against Trump this time like they did last time?
Probably. That's a really good question. I don't think so, actually. I think with this third election, not as much. There are going to be a small base of like extreme liberals that will, and I think there is a faction of them that will. But because young people are losing, and even like previous liberal young people are losing their interest in Biden, there are factions of the left that are falling away and becoming more moderate. At least that's what I've been seeing. I don't think at least with this election, I haven't seen like fervor on either side. This is why with this happening with Trump in this trial, that I think is going to be I think that's going to change a lot of people's minds. And I think that was a big mistake for not like although solely the Democrats are behind it, but it was a big mistake for that to happen if I were to be a Democrat or, for the Democrat base, because I just think it's bringing a lot more consciousness into what's happening into election, because I don't know, this election cycle for 2024, I just didn't see fervor on either side for quite some time. We did have our little thing with the libertarian movement with Trump, that happened a couple weeks ago, now it's gone. There was some conversation here and there, but it seemed like initially in the initial stages of this election, it was kind of like, oh, it's going to be Biden and Trump again, and no one was really excited about it. You know what I mean? There didn't seem to be that excitement from 2016 or even a little bit in 2020. So I didn't have like high hope. I knew Trump was going to be the nominee, but I didn't have high hopes for him like winning or losing either way. But this time with this trial happening, or these charges, I think it's going to boost him up a little bit more.
What was your take on Trump's appearance at the Libertarian Convention? Yeah, since we didn't hear it before.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. I was out on vacation, so I didn't watch it. I watched, I think, like a portion of it. And I listened to it a bit on Twitter. I didn't really throw my opinion out there. So, I tried to check out a little bit, but it was hard not to tune in. I think it was very it was very interesting. I will say I am not pleased with their final pick. I would prefer Trump in this case. Austin, I have been a Trump supporter for quite some time. And I will say I only do it pragmatically. I'm not like a diehard Trump girl. I never was.
Right.
But, I'm trying to be strategic here in conservative politics. I think he's a greater mobilizing force than the other. I forgot his name, the other pick.
The Libertarian Party guy, or?
Yeah.
Chase
Oliver. Yeah, thank you, Chase Oliver. I'm not pleased with it. I think Trump would have been better, But that's all I'm gonna say. I just thought it was entertaining, especially when Trump was speaking. I thought it was kind of funny.
Do you think Trump would actually appoint a libertarian to be in his cabinet?
I think there's possibility. Yes, I think so. I think that he did learn with his first time around in the first admin. He made a few mistakes, and I believe he's acknowledged with some of his picks that he made some poor picks. I think that I think this time around Trump would be a little bit more cautious with who he picks to be in his administration. Maybe not as much as Chase Oliver. I don't know, but here's the thing. I don't know that much about Chase Oliver. I've only seen a few headlines. I've only read like a few blurbs here and there, so I could be wrong in my analysis. But when it comes to actually making real institutional moves in America, I just think Trump would have been a more strategic selection. And I think right now with Biden in office, our best bet right now is to hone in on someone that has a more mobilizing power than someone like Chase Oliver. But I'm a very pragmatic person. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
I think I'm with you, Daniela, for sure. We appreciate your point of view on this one. Is there anything else that you think that we should cover before we let you go today, or anything you'd like to plug?
Man, that stewardess conversation you had with Camelia was really enriching. I would bring it up again,
Go
but
ahead.
I know you're running. Oh no,
We've got a few minutes. Go ahead. Your take on hot flight attendants giving better service.
I was flying. I traveled a lot this last year, and also with my recent vacation, I do pay attention to stewardesses as well as stewards, I will add. And yes, when the more pleasing to the eye, the more at least the better the service it is perceived to be. So I'm all on board with what you were saying, Austin. I think we need to bring back genetic superiority in the flight attendant institution. So
exactly. Good enough to serve me a bottle at the nightclub. Good enough to serve me some champagne on the flight. Daniela, where can people follow you online?
Follow me on Twitter, everyone. I'm trying to grow my following. It's at Pensac Daniela, my last name, first name. Follow me on Twitter. And I do have a Substack. If you like to read, if you're a reader, read me on Substack. It's you can just find me by my name on there, or the name of the publication is Freedom Verse. I'm trying to grow it. I exponentially grew while I was on vacation. It was crazy. So if you like to read, or if you want to watch more video content of me, go on Substack and find me there.
There you go. Genetic superiority and flight attendants. And it wouldn't be Thirsty Thursday if there wasn't a lot of genetic superiority here on the show as well.
There you go.
Daniela Pensac, follow her on X. We appreciate you very much, Daniela. Thanks for getting up so early, and welcome back from vacation. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I'll see you next week.
Thank you. See you next week. Wow. Good stuff. Give her a round of applause. What say you? Oh, it's the sad music. I know. Man, so far it's been a great week. Tomorrow's Friday, which means Freedom Family Friday, which means my smoking hot redheaded libertarian wife Stephanie's on. My brother Justin Peterson is also going to be on. We're going to have a terrific time. You don't want to miss tomorrow's show, so make sure you come back tomorrow. Quest Fanning says, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Thanks for that donation. Appreciate you, Quest. All the support that we've been getting from you guys financially lately has been making a big difference. Whenever you're making purchases at apforlibertyshop.com, or you're making those Rumble Rant donations, it's going to go right into the mouth of my baby. Or it helps us to grow the Wake Up America Show's network. So why don't you head on over to AP if you're like Daniela Pensac and myself. Head on over to apforlibertyshop.com. If you're a libertarian for Trump, then we're the only place in the whole freaking world that you can get Libertarians for Trump merchandise. That's right, apforlibertyshop.com. It's the only place that we have Libertarians for Trump stuff. You can get a cool shirt. I think Courtney Conover's flag is running a little late in the mail, but it will be there soon, Courtney. Don't worry. Libertarians for Trump flags. You can fly and trigger your neighbors. Shiver me triggers. Over again at apforlibertyshop.com. Now listen, I know you love the coffee. Founding Flavors Coffee is always a top seller at apforlibertyshop.com. Surprisingly enough, we sell these K-Cup filters for our coffee like crazy, but Jeffersonian Java takes the top spot. Franklin's Electric Elixir, also delicious, 4.8 stars, 4.9 stars, all independent verified reviews. Thomas's Painkiller is my #1 favorite. I love it. but so hot right now. Look at all of the top sellers at apforlibertyshop.com right now. What are we selling? We're selling Appeal to Heaven flags, triggering, coffee, Libertarians for Trump shirts. We're selling Javier Milei shirts, Ron Swanson. This one you got to get before the 4th of July. History began on July 4th, 1776. Everything before that was a mistake. Get it at apforlibertyshop.com, especially before I start raising prices on these things, because I think that's a little bit too low. How to spot a communist shirt. It's the best in the business. It's apforlibertyshop.com. All right, we got to run. See ya tomorrow, Freedom Family Friday. Thanks so much for all the support, guys. We appreciate you. Exit through the Grift Shop. We'll see you here tomorrow on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupamericashow.com.
Wake Up America Show mini documentaries are centered around the theme of political concepts which make the world go round. Today's bonus content, we deal with the issue of regulatory capture. Regulatory capture is a concept where regulatory agencies favor the interests they regulate over the public's. This theory suggests that agencies end up serving the industry rather than the public. George Stigler introduced this theory in the 1970s, highlighting how industries intensely focus on influencing regulations that affect them. Stigler pointed out the imbalance of influence between organized industries and the general public, who are less likely to engage intensely with regulators. Industries have substantial budgets for influencing regulators, contrasting sharply with the limited resources individuals use to defend their interests. This disparity is rooted in the economic principle of concentrated benefits versus dispersed costs, affecting public policy and collective action. Often, regulators are drawn from the industry they oversee due to their specialized knowledge and may return to it post-tenure. This creates a revolving door of personnel between government and industry. Sometimes industry promises of future employment for regulators can corrupt the regulatory process. When an agency serves as an advocate for the industry it regulates, it is considered a captured agency, operating without direct corruption but influenced by industry perspectives. Even advocacy groups like the Sierra Club, which push for strict regulations, are outmatched financially by industry groups. Regulatory capture is seen throughout various industries and historical periods, as regulations can inadvertently protect established firms by raising barriers for new entrants. Regulations often increase market entry costs, requiring new firms to comply with burdensome rules that favor existing players. This keeps small business small and big business big. In extreme cases, regulatory capture leads to deregulation that benefits the regulated entities, while maintaining barriers that hinder competitors. In the transportation sector, the U.S. railroad industry in the late 19th century is a classic example of regulatory capture, where regulation facilitated cartel-like conditions. Similarly, in the finance sector, regulatory bodies are often filled with industry insiders who prioritize industry interests, which contributed to the financial crises of the late 2000s. Obamacare was another example, where insurance industry executives were involved in the crafting of the law and then exited the administration to work for the companies they wrote the law in favor of. However, some economists argue that regulatory capture is overstated, citing industries like fossil fuels, where regulation has sometimes reduced profits despite intense lobbying efforts. Understanding regulatory capture is crucial for ensuring that agencies act in the public interest rather than serving the industries they are supposed to regulate. Of course, for libertarians, the bureaucracies of the federal government that regulate industry are expected to be abolished, as Javier Milei has done in Argentina.